Hello, you guys, and welcome to this week's podcast episode. I don't know why I just sang that, but here we go. This week I am joined by a guest, and Emma is one of my previous clients. We worked together for a long time around trauma and identity and all of those things. And Emma is so intelligent and so knowledgeable, and we have every time I talk to her, it's just having a conversation with one of my besties. So I thought it would be really good to bring it on to the podcast and discuss what it's like being a woman in a man's world. Emma is an electrician, and she works in a field that is 99.9% dominated by men. So in this episode, we go into misogyny and sexism in the workplace, how to navigate that, how it is, our experiences of being a woman in a man's world. We also unpack identity and how we can navigate that and understand what that means as we transition into these new parts of our lives, because Emma not long ago had a little baby Luna, and we just wanted to talk about some real topics of being a woman, and we hope it's relatable, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello Emma, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I do feel like this has been a long time in the making, just because we have loads of conversations about this stuff. So it's been a long time getting you onto the podcast. So for people listening, introduce yourself.
So I'm Emma, I'm an electrician, and I'm also a first-time mum to little baby Luna, and she is nearly 6 months now.
Wow.
I know.
Oh my God, that is crazy.
I know.
That's crazy. So the reason I have got Emma on the podcast is because when Emma was working with me, she has been one of my coaching clients and probably one of my very first coaching clients, and we worked together for about 8 months. There was a lot going on in terms of you experiencing sexism, you experiencing misogyny in the workplace, and then a whole process around becoming a mum and what that meant for you and your identity. So I just thought it'd be really interesting to bring you onto the podcast and discuss that. So as you just mentioned in your introduction, you are an electrician. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So I've only actually been in it for about 3 years. So basically when I started working with Lydia, I just come out of a really abusive, toxic relationship. Whole life, everything sort of went down the pan. So I came home running back to my parents and started training to be an electrician, but I actually work on power stations on the national grid. So not like houses and stuff. It's all high voltage panels and wiring and stuff like that. So it's much more of a closed off industry. So things are more magnified than maybe you'd get on building sites and stuff. So that's basically where I am. Before that, I did sales, gym, worked for Groupon, pretty much anything you could think of.
Yeah. And what was it that made you get into being an electrician? Because I know it is quite a masculine job, and it is an area that is predominantly, which is one of the things that we're going to go into, heavily occupied by men. So what was it that made you want to be an electrician and just do something different?
So to be honest, it's not something I'd ever thought about in my entire life. I always wanted to do fashion, and I worked with horses for years. And when I started working in an office, I really did not function well sitting in front of a desk all day. And so when sort of my life kind of came crashing down, a family member actually works in this industry and said, I wanted to take on an apprentice. Why don't you give it a go? And I was like, oh, and then I had nothing better. So I thought, why not? And I was actually pretty good at it, and it just kind of went from there, really. So it's definitely something I fell into rather than chose.
Okay. And we spoke about before being a woman in a man's world, and I want to unpack that with you. I want to unpack and talk about misogyny and sexism and how you deal with that and how you find it, because I know it's been a massive part of the process of you becoming an electrician, and even when you've proved your place, and proved how good you are at the job, like you're still facing that level of like misogyny
Yeah,
and sexism.
it's
So
definitely a super ongoing thing.
yeah. So tell the listeners a little bit about that.
So, like you said, it is a very male dominated industry, and I think the instant assumption is that you're going to be a bit butch, I think, going into it. So when I turn out with my nails and my hair, like with extensions in, not that cool today, but and like nails on, eyelashes on, obviously I'm wearing overalls and boots. I think there's a very blokes are a bit like, what are you doing here? But it's definitely a huge issue. I mean, the industry that I work in is predominantly white men. Like there's not even any other faces of color. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it literally is white men. And until I worked in this industry, I'd never really thought about sexism at work. Like, when you work in offices, there's always, well, for jobs I've been in, there's always been a pretty even spread of women in like high power roles. And it was never even something that crossed my mind until I started doing my exams and being like, oh, I'm the only girl here. And then people, or like health and safety tickets, and you walk into a room and it's full of men and they just stare at you as you walk in. They're like, oh, you must be in the office. No, I'm on the tools. And the face of like, their faces are like, really? And you're like, yeah. So instantly, before you've even picked up a screwdriver, like there is an instant judgment that you're not going to be able to do the job. And then because I contract as well, like I face that on every new job I start because I'm not working with the same people every time. So it's like, are you going to be able to do the job? And I constantly get questions like, can you do that? And it's like the most basic thing that you need to do your role, you get questioned. And then, especially when I got pregnant, it was very much like, you're not going to want to come back to work, or you're not going to, you know, it's just, you constantly have to prove that you're capable of the job. Whereas a man, it definitely wouldn't even cross people's minds. But as soon as you work on site, you have to justify your existence, I guess, and your capabilities. And it's like a constant battle.
Yeah. And I could imagine as well, it's like, I think we hold that stuff in our awareness about like sexism in the workplace and like sexism that women face. But I think, like you, I've experienced that, but now I'm like out of environments that I would feel that. So like, it's not as much in my conscious awareness because I'm not around it all the time. But it feels like, if people can't relate to like the working place, it's if you're ever in the gym and you walk into the weight section and all of the guys look like, it happened today to me actually in the gym, and there was weights on a prowler and I was lifting the weights off like 25 kilograms.
Are you sure you can lift that?
And this guy came over that was like slimmer than me, and he was like, do you want me to lift that off for you? And I was like, no, I'm fine. I've already took two off. Yeah, I could squat you, darling. With my thighs.
But like again, like you said, you've got to prove yourself. And I used to be in gyms all the time, and I think actually that if I was 18 going into it and not sure of myself, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes, because every day you have to be prepared to show up. And like we've said before, like you take on a really like masculine energy, like you become, you kind of have to become one of the lads. Like, because if you really like relate to that feminine energy, they really don't take you seriously, or they flirt with you, or, you know, and then so you find yourself really taking on like a masculine energy, and like where you're like, or literally one of the lads just to get through. And I do find that I really like sit in that space when I'm at work.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Like how we have to, I wonder if anyone listening to this will be like, oh my God, yeah, I do that. But it's like, we spoke about this before when I was on the gym floor. I would say mate all the time. And it's like, why do you say that? Like, it's weird, you're a girl. And I'm like, I don't know, because I feel like as women in like a man's world, we have two options. We're either the hot, attractive one and we get hit on all the time, or we're one of the lads. Like, there's no in between. And I feel like that's how we find our respect in a man's world, is falling into one of those two categories. And that's like it's like interesting, but it's also quite like sad.
I know, but the thing is, what I have found is if you like play into that like attractive one, they might be nice to your face, but in a men environment, you wouldn't expect them to be bitchy, but they are super bitchy, especially in contracting, because everyone wants to hold on to that job. And if you come across as like the attractive one, they might be so nice to your face and like try and flirt with you and stuff, but behind your back they would be like, she can't lift this, she can't do this job. Because whether we like it or not, it's like the argument with sports and all of that stuff, whether we like it or not, men are physically stronger. Like, unless by genetic design, men are physically stronger. Sorry, I can hear Lydia screaming next door. Men are physically stronger. So I can pull cable just as like strong as a lot of the guys, especially the older, slightly overweight men. But if you come across too girly, there's that instant like, she can't do this job, it's a physical job, instantly. And then you have to fight harder. So becoming the like lad is kind of like the only way you can get through and gain like any respect.
It's like the default comfort to become like a man in a man's world. And even that like in itself is massive, because even though we're women and we're trying to be like have like the same level of quality in jobs in certain situations, like the default mode for me and you in the past has been to go into that male energy and become one of the lads. So then are we being women in a man's world?
I know, and you're so right. And I was actually thinking about this before we recorded, about like the whole having a baby thing and working and stuff. And I think as much as we want to be equal, there will never be equality, because
strong statement.
because women carry a baby. It affects your body, it affects you physically and mentally in a way a man will never understand, like rightly or wrongly, because it doesn't happen to them. They might be alongside you the whole way and see everything from their perception. But what I have really found is, like, going on to like the change in your like identity, is that there is something that happens when you have a baby and you work, especially with the sort of job I have, because now I have to step back into a role where I'm not just the only girl on site. I also have a child to think about. So I can't work the hours that they work. I always have that in the back of my head, that I can't just go and work in Scotland for 2 months, because I have to think of Luna, like, you know. And so in that respect, unless your partner's a stay-at-home dad, and which is great, but I also don't think they still will ever understand the mental and physical changes that you go through to have a child, but also how that affects you in the workplace. So it will never be equal, because you can't work when you're giving birth. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just impossible. And you're not compensated like you'd be at work. You're not, you know, for a whole range of reasons, you will never achieve full equality in the workplace, because women experience life differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think that's just how do you think that would have went down if you were still in the old roles that you were in? Do you think you would have got that level of equality, or do you think no matter where we are on the scale?
I think the problem is, unless you have the thing is, obviously I can only speak from my perspective, my perceived experiences. Like, I can only talk from what I've experienced. But when you have a baby, well, when I was pregnant, my brain just didn't function like it used to. So even simple tasks that I would have excelled at, like, I've always been a busy person, I found really difficult. Physically, things got so difficult. And even when the baby's here, and you obviously go through the physical changes of giving birth, like, which you need time to recover from. And as a man, you don't ever experience any of that. So if you have time off work, you are for what, say you went on holiday for 2 weeks, you're still the same person that you were physically, that you were like, unless you've had an accident or whatever. Let's just talk like if there wasn't some catastrophic trauma, like, you know, whereas to have a baby, you have to have time off work. You have to, like, you know, there's a whole host of things that have to happen. And no company, or unless you work for the best company ever, pays you as if you were sat in the office. And then once you have a child, you have an extra range of responsibilities that you then have to tick off. And I would say in the most women I speak to, that falls down to the mum. So in society, a man can have 3 kids and still leave the house at 6 a.m, go to work, come home late from work, you know, can go to the gym, can go out with the lads, and there is no societal responsibility for him to do any of that stuff. Whereas as a woman, if you left your child at home with your partner, went to work early, stayed out late, did all these things for you, you would instantly be judged by society, because like those expectations are there. And I don't see how that will ever change, because even if you decide not to have children, so when I started working on site, I obviously didn't have a child, and I was 30 at the time, and I can't tell you how many blokes would be like, have you got kids? And I'd be like, no. And they're like, oh, does no one want you? Are you on the shelf? So even not having a child, you've got to justify your existence. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, you know, I can't ever see a way that things will be like that equal. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I even feel like we experience that though, you know, like even through little things like our periods. Like I always say to Luke, like, you bleed you, if I could give you the cramps, the bleeds and the mood swings, the body changes, like you do that for X amount of days and come back to me and tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
Because there's always a certain point in the month where a woman's not on an A game. Like we should just be allowed days where we just fucking sleep and do nothing. Like,
100%.
Because it's just so
100%.
difficult sometimes. But it's like, it's forever having to justify even like little things when we're on our periods and we're just absolutely exhausted. And it's like, what have you done today? Why are you so tired? And you're like, because my body is about to bleed, and that's why. So I definitely agree with that. And I think as much as we want to come away from it, the question of motherhood, because this is something I constantly get asked now. I'm 30 this year. Like literally 100%. Was in my granddad's the other day, and like my uncle started asking me, when are you gonna have kids? I don't think you're gonna have kids, are you, Lydia? Like, you're running out of time, you're gonna be having kids so late. And I'm like, I'm fucking 29, like leave me alone.
Mate, my dad said to me, I didn't think you'd ever have children.
Yeah,
well, he's holding his grandchild. Yeah.
Didn't pop them out by the time you were 25.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think they are the levels of like inequality that I agree. I don't know, are we ever going to move past them? Because I think if a woman does choose to focus on her career, it's like she's selfish, or
and you step into that masculine energy. I think, and if you're career focused, which is great, I am, that's always the masculine side of you. So like there is no, like, the thing is, I was talking to my mum about this, and like we like to see the world in black and white, and it just isn't. And I think we're very in a society that's very obsessed with putting labels on things and making things black and white. And I think lots and lots of things are grey. But I think as women in very masculine worlds, like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's loads of people out there that don't have great times and experiences and all of that stuff. But very worlds that are still women in man's worlds, you have to adopt a certain level of masculine energy to survive. Like, and I don't really ever see a way out of that, because if you're not prepared to work with your hands or get dirty or any of those things that sit more with like a masculine perception, you're not gonna survive.
Yeah. And you know what, what may come to mind then, I don't know why, but it's like that not all men movement, right? I don't know why this has just come to mind. And we were saying like, oh, it's not all men. And I was like so pissed off with that movement because I was like, it's not all men.
I had this argument with blokes at work every day. But it's not all men, and I was like, right.
Yeah, you were cracking the whip. I remember talking to you about it.
Throwing down my soapbox.
But it's like, even when you're in male environments and because men are disgusting when they're together, they kind of like take you in as one of their own and talk about women in this derogatory way and forget that you're also a woman. And then if you question that or say anything, it's like, why are you so sensitive?
Oh my God. Oh my God, especially
we experienced the sexism firsthand, but we're not allowed to challenge it because we've been taken into the tribe of men. So now,
oh my God,
we're not a woman.
This just reminds me, I would have these exact arguments, and because they knew I was pregnant, I'd get stop being hormonal.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not hormonal. I'm just trying to tell you that you're an idiot.
You're a fucking ass.
Yeah, basically. But the trouble is, unless you're confident, very confident in yourself and your ability, and also a bit of a lad, I can't see how you would survive in these insanely laddie masculine environments. And obviously that needs to change. But I think for the moment, when there's not many women in these environments, the only way to be seen and be heard is to be one of them, basically. And just be very good at what you do.
Yeah. And just be like, not be afraid to tell a man to like fuck off. But then you know what? The other side to me is like, there's always a part of me that feels, and this was like a heavy thing to sit with, but there's always a part of me that feels unsafe in a man's presence.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Always
like, I know what you mean, and even if it wasn't that I didn't feel like like at work, I always feel like physically safe, but like not mentally isn't the right word, but I was always on my guard, because if I showed too much of that girly side, or whatever, they'd be away talking about me, like being like, oh, she can't do our job, or she's not strong enough to do that, or so like if you dare like complain about something, especially sort of younger guys of a certain attitude, like they'd instantly sort of jump on that weakness and try and manipulate, like go running back to supervisors and be like, oh, she can't do that, she's not strong enough, or like, so you've always got a level of like guard up.
Bitches, aren't they?
Oh my God. Until I always used to think women were bitches at work, until you work on a site full of men. Oh my God. Like you'd literally see them like scuttle off to the office, or like just talk about you, but oh my God. And I'd be like, a little like Jesus, like gossiping fishwives, like all just like in an office, like, oh, so and so did this, what? And it's like, oh my God. And like no one will admit they're wrong, no one will admit, like, it's such an ego fest, it's ridiculous.
Oh, it's an absolute ego fest. And you know what, that comment then, like, I think it's interesting, but I don't think it's like a conscious thing that I always feel unsafe. And maybe it's like because of the work that I've done in the past, like working in so much like horrendous stuff. But yeah, there's just a part of me like subconsciously that feels unsafe around men.
I know
not
what you mean.
That
like,
I know, not like Luke, obviously, not like Luke, but it's even like I'm very much aware. I don't know, it's weird how my brain works, but I do think it's because of the type of work I've done in the past. Even I'm very aware that Luke instantly could kill me. I'm very
100%. There's definitely a physical difference, and also like, well, having been through quite a traumatic experience with a partner, I do find that there's something about when men take on a certain tone of voice, or there's like a certain it's just, for me, it's a very triggering thing for me. There's like a certain tone of voice that just instantly makes me go into that like trauma mode of like, fuck, you could hurt me, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, they don't even have to be like physically aggressive. There's just like something in a voice that just makes you go, oh shit.
And that's that equality, you know, when you were talking before about like the equality changing, and there's just things that men will never experience. That's something that a man, I don't think, I'm not saying obviously all men, because I know there's definitely situations, but just for the vast majority of men, if I'm angry at Luke, he will never have that thing of like, she could kill me.
Unless 100%.
Like that innate fear. And like, let me clarify, Luke has never ever.
No, I know what you mean.
It's something, I think, because I've seen it in the work that I've done. It's like, it's probably like a protective thing because I've dealt with a lot of trauma, so I'm very aware of other people's situations and like how, I don't know, just that imbalance is very much prominent.
Yeah.
But
and it's
men will never experience that.
No, and it's interesting you say this, and this is going to be very, very controversial, and I really don't mean it to be, and it's quite hot topic, but it's interesting you say that men will never experience that, because me and my mum were talking about transgenders, and we were saying that, because she was saying that she feels like it's another space that is getting taken away from women, not that they don't have their right to be in a space and be themselves, but again, because if you grow up as a boy, regardless of whether you're unhappy, and it has a whole host of issues around that, you do not experience what a girl experiences in terms of sexualization, predatory, like, and I know there are different lived experiences, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but in general, there's not that, you know, there's certain experiences that you will only ever experience as a girl, even things like you said, with periods and stuff like that, like, and I'm not taking anything away from that space, and they have their whole own set of issues and traumas. I can still hear Luna screaming. But you know, like that's the thing, and I think like there will never be such a thing as truly equal, whether that's rich and poor, women and men, because we are in a societal construct that will never ever allow that, just because of whether it's genetics, whether it's work, whether it's money, like, you know, it just never ever will be truly equal, because to be in a man's space, like where I am working, I always have to be slightly masculine. Like, you know, it's just one of those things, I think, that, you know, and obviously we can still fight for change and to have our voices heard and more women in these areas. But I just think it's just something that we have to accept, that there will never be in that full level of equality, because we have such different lived experiences.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think that conversation with your mum is definitely something, like a conversation I've had before, and I actually touched on the same thing and was like, the experiences is, like you said, they will obviously have their own experiences, but like there's just things that you can't articulate or put into words about being a woman, about walking down the street and being a woman, about being a teenager and growing into your body. Like these experiences that you can't explain, it's just a lived experience, and it just becomes a part of who you are. And I think also it's like, for me, like all of the death that we keep seeing around like women just doing their own thing, there's a part of me that feels so strongly about. And I've done a podcast on this, and like, yeah, we should be able to go for the run, and yes, we should be able to walk home in the evening, and we should be able to walk through a park and do all of these things. But the matter of fact, black and white, is that we can't, because there's people out there that see us as vulnerable and pry on that. So it's like, how do we manage that, wanting to have our equality but also navigating our own space and not being naive, not making ourselves more at risk?
But also, I think it's the same thing with like suicides in men. So You know, we can talk till we're blue in their face about there being issues with men sharing their feelings and committing suicide and all of this horrendous stuff. And it happened to a guy I went to school with very recently. He took his own life, and it was so tragic. But it came out with all these people being like, you know, I'm always here to have a door open if I can just talk to one person. Or, you know, all these things are well intentioned, but realistically, the only way you are ever going to change the way men deal with emotions, because at 32, you know, you're pretty set on how you deal with stuff, and me having a conversation isn't going to change that. Whereas we need to look at the way we are raising our children to make them more confident in themselves, better at expressing their emotions, better at dealing with their emotions, and as parents, like, I am very aware with Lena that I don't want her to have any of my issues passed on to her. Like, if she's got issues, they're going to be her own. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want my unresolved trauma going to her, because that's happened to me. Whereas, like, the whole thing with boys, you know, we need to make them, our little boys, grow up feeling like they can talk about stuff and that they can be whoever they want to be. But also we need to teach them to, like, respect women and that they're not sexual creatures and stuff. And unfortunately, I think you're almost not flogging a dead horse, but until you start looking at the next generation and how they're being taught and how they're being educated, and, you know, how conversations around sex and girls and how consent and all of that stuff, I think unfortunately we've kind of missed the boat on our generation. And, like, you know, it's all going to be about what we do with the next, like, and how they're brought up and how their social constructs are and how they see, like, patriarchal issues and all of that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, the world we're living in, men that are over a certain age some men see women as like horrible, like just there to do what they want with. And a lot of men, it's not on a violent level, but you see TikToks of like 16-year-old boys talking about spitting in girls' mouths and stuff like that. And like there's an account on Instagram, Lala, let me explain. She's an ex-social worker, and the stuff she comes out with is spot on. Like, you know, there's these kids where their mums are like going, yeah, like, while they're rating girls' attractiveness or how girls were in bed, and these kids are like 17, 18, and their mums are behind them like laughing about it, like talking about girls like they're bits of me. So until we change that in society growing up, like, we're never gonna be able to walk down the street at night, or, like, you know, it's just not gonna happen because of how women and men have been, like,
conditioned, brought up.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah, I think that's true as well. And I think you can look at a TikTok and see it for what it is and see it in the moment, but then also the work I've done has shown me the escalation. And, like, a lot of the time, the stuff that's happening, the severe stuff, has been
my God,
happening, and it stems from that type of stuff.
And I've experienced it firsthand. Like, if I think about how it escalates, those things in the beginning that you, as a girl, you know, you get all these things that are like, you know, like basically how to get a man, like, you know, and if you have to do those things to get a man, you're probably getting an abusive one, like, do you know what I mean? Like, because or that has no respect for women, because that's how these things escalate.
Yeah, that is very true. I was going to ask you one of the
somewhere completely different, haven't we?
No, that was a good conversation. No, that was very good. I was going to ask you how to overcome, like, misogyny and sexism, but I think I feel like we've touched on that and just said, like, you said things about unfortunately becoming one of the lads and having to, like, shape yourself in that environment. So I just want to ask you a little bit about becoming a mum and the triggers with body image, because me and you are very similar in the sense of, like, and, you know, I can say this without you taking it the wrong way, but we're not like those maternal women, you know what I mean? Like, there's a part of us that's selfish, there's a part of us that if we wanted kids, it would have been later on. And I was there coaching you through that process of becoming a mum and the whole identity thing, and it was massive for you. So Explain to the listeners a little bit about that, because I think this is the stuff that women don't talk about and they fucking need to talk about.
Yeah. I think, you know, there are, like you said, like we're from a particular camp of how we think about children. Like obviously you get people that's all they've ever wanted, but I've always been very career focused. Like I'm a massive control freak, like, and so I used to really be into the gym. I used to dabble in bikini competing, so strict diets, you know, control freak to the max. And one of my main ways of controlling things in my life is controlling what I look like. And obviously when you become pregnant, that just goes out the window. Like you have zero control over how you look, which for me, I'm still struggling with really. And also like everything I planned for my career went out the window. And honestly, like it was quite a dark place. And I mean, I'm still sort of fighting with it now. Like for me, pregnancy was quite a roller coaster. Like sometimes I was like, fuck, like I hate this. Like I hate being pregnant. And also like I'd suffered quite a bad miscarriage before, so like there was always that fear over it as well. So like it was quite like every scan I'd be anxious because I didn't know what was going to happen, like whether she was going to be all right, but then also like I was like hating certain things that were happening to my body. And like so for me actually pregnancy wasn't overly enjoyable. And it's only now that she's getting more of like a proper little personality that I actually like. I definitely didn't get that instant bond. And I think that's a real hard thing to talk about because people like when you talk to people, like when you're pregnant, you become the center of attention because everyone wants to talk about the baby, talk about this, talk about that. So you're going through like a really weird journey, but you still matter. Do you know what I mean? Like people are still talking to you like you matter. And like I just had to really like work on techniques to just keep those like thoughts from like running away from me and just being like, no, just focusing on what I can control and all of that kind of stuff, because exercise became harder because I had problems with my hips and stuff. So I just had to really focus on the things that I could control. But now she's here, it's almost harder in a different way because you kind of no longer matter. Like the baby is everything and what you want doesn't matter. And well, that's how I kind of feel anyway. Like all the questions about you when you're pregnant disappear as soon as the child arrives. And like, so it's been a really hard thing because like you've got all this pressure of like being a great mum and all of this, but people are just like, oh, isn't it the best thing? But it's worth it. And I think, well, what's worth it? Like, what is worth it? Sleepless nights, like I'm fat, I've got stretch marks, like, you know, like what are you telling me is worth it? Like, you know, because at the moment she just cries. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's like a really hard thing because you have to put on a brave face and be like, yeah, it's brilliant, yeah, I just fell in love at first. And don't get me wrong, I love her and I would protect her with anything, but I think in the beginning I didn't have that gushing warm feeling, like, and that's developed over time and people really don't talk about that. And I now really have to sit back and go, what is it that makes me me, and try and make steps to get back to those things, because then it makes me a better partner, better mother, better everything, like with those sections of me.
So we're back because baby Luna decided that she wanted the mum. So we took a little pause while she got fed, even though she didn't drink the bottle. She was being a diva.
Of course,
but you know what though? I feel like that sums up perfectly exactly everything that you've just been saying. Like, that's the reality of being a mum. Oh, look God, at her smiling little Luna. That is the reality of being a mum.
It really is. And I think, like, you know, and it's even like, love my partner, he is really good with her, but like when we're both at home, as soon as she gets upset, it's like, mum, like, do you know what I mean? And you just have this whole extra like persona that you have to take on, and it's like, you know, you literally are trying to do it all, like literally. Like, and now you have this extra thing that is like totally reliant on you. And like when you see them change, it's brilliant, and it is like, oh my god. But like when they're being difficult, you have to like, I have to just keep reminding myself that she doesn't owe me anything. Like, you know, she's a human in her own right, and she doesn't owe me to be good or to be quiet or to sleep. And actually I want her to be confident and her own person. Do you know what I mean? Like, so and unfortunately that starts now, and if she's upset, she's gonna let me know. Like, you know.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and taking the time.
Thanks for having
your
me.
Lovely mother having Luna, but she definitely wants you back now. She's like, I'm so fed up with not having all the attention. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I think this has been an amazing conversation, and I thank you for your honesty and your rawness and just being you, because you are amazing and you're doing an amazing job. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. You know, I could talk about a million things all day. So
honestly, I know. Imagine if we lived by each price. We'd be in a coffee shop for about 5 hours.
Debating world issues.
Debating the world.
It was lovely to see you. I hope I didn't ruffle too much.
No, we didn't. It was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Luna.